Well, good afternoon and welcome to the new rebranded show. So I'm here at the Barn Theatre in Cirencester behind the barn door, and welcome to Couch Confessions with Dr. Dawn. So to start the series, who better to invite to join me than the nation's best known and favourite interior designer and my dear, dear friend, Laurence Llewelyn-Bowen. Laurence, thank you so much. Thank you so much, because I know you're very much locked down at your house outside Cirencester with the whole family. So life's pretty busy.
Yeah, no, and it's a very... I've never really worked out before quite how boisterous, hungry and messy my family actually were. And I was, well, no, you do, because you know, when they're young, you're anticipating all sorts of stuff everywhere and discarded toys and these sort of plaintive cries of, Daddy, I need wiping. But, you know, now they're in their 20s, you would have thought they'd moved on from that. They have moved on from the wiping, to be fair.
Very glad to hear
but of course, they both got, well, one's got a husband, one's got a fiancé, and we've got a grandson as well. So we have definitely become a freak show, but a freak show that can't move.
And can't be seen by anyone else.
Can't be seen by anyone else. Just doing our freaky thing.
You can't monetise it.
Our freak flag is flying, but only at home. But it's, you know, I mean, for goodness sake, it's been a wonderful experience. I've always wanted to have so much more quality time with my low-quality family, and so there we are.
But you only just made it back, because I know you've been working an awful lot in Australia, haven't you?
Yeah, that was very complicated, because just as lockdown was being mooted, really, and of course it's something that was happening at different rates across the world. Australia was actually very quick and very, you know, emphatic about what it wanted to do. But I was just coming to the end of a very, very, very lengthy series, so we were on week... I think it's about week 15, and coming up to 2 challenges off the grand final of House Rules. And the issue was whether I was going to crumble and dissolve into a puddle of celebrity tears and say, get me out of here. Get me out of here now, or else I'll never get home. Or whether I'd sort of stick with the Mexican standoff and hope that there would still be a flight by the time we finished filming. And it was a constant thing. And in the end, we pulled 2 of the challenges. But the last 2 or 3 days, literally, I was on a flight and then off a flight, on a flight, off a flight, because they were just cancelling them left, right, and centre. The final indignity was that the lovely hotel where I stay suddenly got converted into a lazaretto, as they call it in the Renaissance, somewhere to put plague victims. There was a big thing in Australia. There was a cruise ship that came back, which basically accounted for nearly all the COVID cases that they had. And they all trooped into my hotel at about 5 o'clock in the morning, just as I was leaving.
So you're jolly lucky to be clear then.
Well, I mean, it was really strange. And so I stayed one more night, and room service arrived in, you know, like in a lead container. Sort of pushed, the guy pushed it with a broomstick. So I was very, very pleased to find that I did actually get a flight that night and get back in time. But I mean, each stage I got as far as Qatar. I didn't know whether I could get any further than that. And then I did finally get to Heathrow and came through and realised I'd left my telephone on the plane.
So you couldn't call for a lift?
Basically, no. So I had that took a bit of irritation. But no, I mean, it's one of the things that I think this situation has done for a lot of people, me very much, is really get you to stop and realise that we've been very cavalier, very quick to just accept our ability to go all over the world without, you know, as if it was a casual thing. Actually, there's an enormous amount that goes into being able to get someone to Australia, and yet we've become incredibly casual about it. We've become incredibly entitled to it, I think.
Because you've spent a lot of time. I know, you know, having spoken to Jackie over the last few years, you've spent more time in Australia than here, I think, haven't you?
I've certainly spent more time in the lounge at Dubai Airport than I have in my house in Cornwall. I worked that one out. And to the extent that I often help out now, you know, if there's a lot going on, I'll put around, you know, pass around the canapes and stuff. But yeah, no, Australia, the House Rules series, which is in its season 7, 8, because I'm judging people's houses all over Australia. You know, I can't kind of just nip in and nip out. You know, I'm there really for the long haul.
And so literally, what's the concept of the show then? Do they do their house up and then you judge it? How does it work?
I'd love to say it was more complicated than that, Dawn. I'd love to say there was a lot more involved, but basically that's it. Although what's good about Australia, I mean, you know, a lot of the other shows, like the apartment that I do in Asia, that's a very short span. It's a bit like Changing Rooms made by MTV. It's a lot of B-list celebrities in Daisy Duke shorts, really, doing a bit of painting. House Rules is much more, it's got that real digger spirit, you know, let's actually tear the house down and rebuild it. It's much more architectural. There's a lot more going on in it, and I like that. I like the bluffness of the way that everything happens with an Australian makeover. It's less about the frilly stuff, and they've also got the incredibly good taste to actually enjoy my opinions.
And how did that come about? Was it a concept that you took to them, or did they approach you?
No, I mean, you know, never underestimate the global pull of Changing Rooms. I mean, there was Changing Rooms was one of the first really, really big BBC exports and was very popular in Australia, you know, 20 years ago. So actually I've always been quite well known. And they were looking for a rebrand. And one of the weird things these days is it seems that, you know, actually one of the great British cultural exports is grumpy middle-aged men. You know, me, Clarkson, Ramsey, Cowell, you know, all of us deserve the Queen's Award for Industry. I think export. We're being exported all over the globe to comment on how people do stuff.
Interesting. So Changing Rooms, I guess, for you is like Embarrassing Bodies for me. It doesn't matter how long ago it was.
It's every bit as embarrassing.
Yeah.
You know,
but
every bit as embarrassing.
Just tell me, because I remember hearing somewhere, was it Jackie that was first asked to do that, and she said no?
No, well, she wasn't asked to do Changing Rooms, but she was she had a television agent because she'd written the Debrett's Wedding Etiquette Guide, which is still pretty definitive. And because she was a wedding organiser, one of the first wedding organisers.
And she does throw a very good party.
And she does throw. Well, she'd started off with parties, and she worked for the Admirable Crichton. She did some incredible parties, lots of stuff for the Princess of Wales, Robert Maxwell, all sorts of, you know, big iconic 80s parties. And then she started her own business focusing on weddings, and I think it was ITV were looking to commission a wedding series from her. So she had a television agent, but actually that coincided with her becoming pregnant with Cecile. So she was on maternity leave, basically. Meanwhile, the BBC had cooked up this crazy Changing Rooms concept, and her agent, rather grudgingly, rang and said, "Isn't your husband an interior designer? Could he go and try out?" So cross about it. I remember fuming. You know, I don't want to be on television. Why? And they made me sit in go to a studio and paint some shelves, which I was really unhappy about. Spent the entire time really unhappy, deeply not wanting to be on television, which of course made me very attractive to them. But that was, oh God, Dawn, that was like 25 years ago.
And how many series did you do of Changing?
Not many. They didn't do many at all. I think we barely got to our 100th programme. It's not like now. The producers then had a very strong aesthetic, which is that it should never be more than 8 programmes in a series. It should be a very big thing when Changing Rooms comes back. Every year it should have a real sense of timetable to it. It should only be made in the summer where the weather is likely to be better. So we actually made very few. In fact, it was like the early days of Teletubbies when they only ever used to film on a sunny day. We literally just did that. Later on, when I took over presenting it, we then started stretching the seasons a bit more. But you know, compared to everything else, DIY as well as everything since, it's extraordinary how few of them there are. They're beautiful, treasured, little, wonderfully crafted gems, yeah.
So was it, I mean, was it decommissioned, or is it still sitting on a shelf somewhere? Might we see it come back?
Well, there's always, I mean, people always say, why on earth don't you bring it back? Because, I mean, it's such an incredibly straightforward, understandable idea. And also, it is the one that kicked everything else off.
It is. It's the one that everybody else seems to be trying to copy Changing Rooms. So you do kind of think, well,
it never,
bringing it back.
In many ways, it was also actually the first reality show, because it was the first time that it was all about literally just filming what people were doing. It wasn't manipulated, you know, the rubbish bits didn't get left out. I mean, if anything went wrong, obviously, that was the thing that got left in. It's when it went right that they didn't like it so much. So it is extraordinary that something as clear and straightforward as neighbours swap, you've got a set amount of money, set amount of time, that it didn't really, didn't ever return. But I think, you know, I mean, one of the problems with one of the reasons that it went was that it was just becoming swamped by programs that were essentially about value. They were about how much your home was worth based on what you did to it. Obviously, what we did on Changing Rooms did very little for the property value. Did an enormous amount for the emotional value, didn't it? Yeah, exactly. That's right. It was the emotional investment for Changing Rooms, not the financial investment. Yeah, no, they were very, very heady days.
And how much time did you spend with the couples then? Did you have a good brief with them, or?
Yeah, I mean, I used to get to know them quite well. I mean, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I loved the practicality of it. I think, and particularly when it's, you know, when I finally gave in and decided I was going to do it and decided I was going to after having made the pilot. I liked the fact that it was all about trying to do stuff then and there. You know, I was building some really very big stuff for some really very wealthy clients in, you know, some great locations. But actually, those little bits of film and changing rooms were great fun. We were, you know, at the top of a tower block and had 500 quid and, you know, some knicker elastic and very little else. It was you know,
I'm still
it was live and acoustic.
I'm still smiling at the idea of you being asked to paint some shelves, because I've seen your artwork.
Oh, God. Well, actually, in the end, I ended up painting some paper and then sticking it on the shelves to make like a kind of a, almost like Gaudi-esque tile mosaic, which, again, I think they enjoyed because obviously it was so pointless. I mean, why bother? You know, why not just paint the shelves? But I literally got that classic telephone call the next day from the producers saying, well, God, that was, you know, your name is stupid. No one's ever going to remember your name. Your clothes are ridiculous. Why? Who would ever think of painting anything wearing a velvet jacket and leather trousers? You're haughty. You've got the wrong attitude. You just don't listen to people. You're perfect. Can you start on Monday?
And it would have been.
It was that whole list of stuff. And I was thinking, I got away with it. And in fact, I mean, there was a thing in the press a couple of weeks ago about when I tried to get myself sacked on Changing Rooms, which is absolutely genuine. I got to the stage, I thought, I can't do this anymore. This is so boring. I hate the way that you know, this is going. And it was a very aggressive season where, for the first time, it was a bit more manipulated. We never actually were manipulating it that much. And I was doing a lot of other stuff. I was doing Homefront for BBC Two, and I was doing Taste for Big Things, and I was doing, I think I was doing Fantasy Rooms as well. It was basically just too much going on. And I thought, I know what, I'm going to make my own Viking funeral on Changing Rooms by basically not doing anything. And we were in a large kind of country house somewhere up north. And I was working with I was working with the head of the local council, who was an SDP councillor, for the Tory councillor, who was the guy that lived in the big house. And the husband of the SDP councillor who I was working with did quite a good line in erotic wall paintings. So I went, so basically, you get on with the bedroom walls, anything you want, make it as rude as possible. I'll make a bed using sort of nude caryatids, which I'll do in Tron-Loy. And then all we'll do is sprinkle some rose petals around and light a few candles. That's got to get me sacked.
And
of course it didn't. Of course
it gave you another full series.
For goodness sake, of course it didn't. I mean, it didn't help that actually Laura McCree, who was the other designer, did something I think was perfectly pleasant. But anyway, my SDP councillor absolutely hated it and did one of those was ripping it off the walls in front of the cameras. So, yeah. So that was that, basically. I was then talked down and told that I had to carry on.
You're talking you were painting walls. You painted a wall in one of your rooms with cherubs and all sorts of things at home. And didn't you do it in a day or something?
Yeah, I always do that to show off. You know, I mean,
It was
this is
amazing.
yeah, no, this is, but that's something that again I used to do on changing rooms. That was always the if I thought the scheme was looking pants by the end of day one, I knew that the way I could rescue it was by painting something on the piano or above the fireplace, because they walk in and they go, that's got pound signs on it. So everything else looked absolute tat. But as long as there was an 18th century landscape above the fireplace. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy the challenge. I mean, in fact, it happened big time. I'd been asked to kind of head up, but also design the Britain is Great campaign house for Mexico Design Week in Mexico City. And this is all being filmed as well, because it was part of what I was doing in China. And I flew in, and literally there was no roof. There was nothing. It was all concrete. It was just nothing. And the press were coming on the Tuesday. This was the Sunday. And I was there was a BBC documentary going on about what I was doing. So I had a camera up my nose the whole time. It was just literally sort of, what the hell am I going to do? I've got bed linen, but I've got no roof. And then I just thought, I know what, I'll paint a mural. And so I did. I did sort of, you know, classical landscape, just in shades of grey and grisaille. And of course, it looked absolutely astonishing with no roof and just lots of concrete and a big plush bed. It looked like I'd totally, you know, that's exactly that was my concept from the outset. That's another one that I really got away with. They didn't ask you
to do that on Stonehenge then?
No. Heady days. Oh, of course, well, poor old Stonehenge got very uncelebrated the other day.
You mentioned DIY SOS a minute ago, and that's still running, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what's happening though. I mean, that's a program, that's a series that I think is going to be very difficult to move forward with because of the particular conditions that a lot of the homeowners or the householders have got. I think that it's going to be a very complicated project to be able to move forward.
Well, I would think a lot of those people will be in the very vulnerable group. So
this is it, and so you know, having coach loads of hairy builders turning up is probably not.
But there are some amazing stories. I mean, some of the spaces that you've created. I do quite a lot of stuff with disabled children and their families, and you know, for them to be able to come home, you know, it's not practical, is it? In most cases. No, and
I mean, the thing is that that's very much the brief at the moment with the programme, is that it is about bringing people home. I'm always I have a very, very specific flashpoint with all of this though, which is that I feel very strongly that it also has to be a design show. It isn't just, you know, a pity party. We shouldn't just be all turning up there, you know, to pat everybody on the head and get them, you know, a nice big flat screen TV. And I think a lot of that comes from, my mother was very disabled, and she was very, very aggressive. She was one of those really bitey disabled people, because she hated even the faintest whiff of patronisation. I've sort of rather inherited that. I always feel that, you know, you don't just make something beige and give it a ramp because somebody's in a wheelchair. And I think particularly, I think that's particularly prescient when you've got a teenage client. Although, I mean, it's what goes right the way through, but I think particularly younger disabled people have got a, you know, like everybody, they've got a real literacy for design. Design is an incredibly important currency for young people. You know, we kind of take it for granted. You know, we sort of go, well, okay, we can, you know, we can shop around, we can do that, we can do this. But I mean, it's something I've really noticed with my daughters as well. I mean, even with my grandson at 3, you know, there's a real specific shopping list of things that they like and they want. And I've always felt very strongly, as, you know, when I do a DIYSS program, that, you know, yes, I'm going to do the rampant stuff, but also I want to ensure that we're doing something that feels, you know, very, very hip, very relevant, that is actually as much about the design as it is about the logistics, about the facilitation. There was a big one we did a couple of years ago, Young Carer Centre in Blackpool, and I wanted to make it so amazing that actually people who weren't young carers would be very jealous. And we you know, I worked with one of my art agents, and we got stuff donated by Damien Hirst, Tracy Emin, you know, anyone you can more or less say, Chapman Brothers, you know, anyone you could think of. This is one of the best contemporary art collections in the world now. And it is just there as a, you know, theoretically as a young carer centre.
I didn't realise your mum was disabled. What was her disability?
She had MS. She was very severely... she had MS for ages, actually, long time. I think she was diagnosed when she was probably in her 30s, late 30s, just after my brother was born. But she was a very, very strong human being, a very focused.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
She'd have to be, really, I suppose. And she was extraordinary. She was incredibly severely physically disabled. But fought so vigorously to maintain an absolute sort of razor-sharp awareness right up until the very end. She was really scary. She was basically every single, you know, every single period drama you can think of, there's that aunt that's not very nice. That's my mother, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. You know, she's normally played by Judi Dench, you know, in a very sort of spiteful, slightly spitty way. But she was very, very strong human being, very inspirational, and was incredibly no nonsense about stuff. When she decided to, and this is something that she thought through a lot. She decided to check herself into the British Home for Incurables.
What a dreadful name.
Great, isn't it? Great branding. Love the branding. And that's so her as well, because it's quite confrontational. You know, even when they changed it to the Queen Mum's Home for Fluffy People or something, she said, I live in the Home for Incurables. It was, you know, all very Dickensian. But she managed to, you know, run the place, and she actually ended up knocking through, you know, so she had several rooms which were all then I had to decorate in, you know, very kind of Knightsbridge light style. But one of the things I think she really instilled in me is that you have to be incredibly on top of the fact that nobody is the same, and that actually people will judge you against their own standards. So actually the thing to do is not judge them back. The thing to understand is that, you know, everything is absolutely how you do it. And this is one thing, when the whole celebrity thing got really crazy, and it went really crazy in the first couple of years. These days, of course, no one cares. It's great. I can shuffle through the centre of Cirencester in my pyjamas.
You think you can.
No one bats an eyelid.
Believe you me, they do.
But the, you know, in the early days when you had I had loads of paparazzi stuff and everything, and Jackie hated it. The children were really small. We lived in a really crap bungalow in Blackheath. You know, we're very unprotected for that kind of thing. But it's one thing that really instilled in me is that, you know, I do an interview and someone would say, oh, you're so normal. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm my normal, you know, you're your normal. You know, the definition of normality is not something that you could apply to everybody. It's not a pasteurized term at all. It's a very, very personal term. And that definitely came from my mother. And I think in a funny sort of way, her attitude allowed me to cope with, well, not really cope, I mean, that sounds so grandiose, but allowed me to kind of cite what was going on with those early celebrity days very, very efficiently. And just go, well, okay, you know, people are making a fuss, big deal, you know, move on. And of course it was Jackie who so cleverly then worked out that if they were going to make a fuss like that, then we ought to sell them bed linen.
I love your wife.
You know, or, you know, because I had this terrible thing, which was that all my swanky clients literally just nosedived the minute changing rooms started. They couldn't bear it. Some were a bit snobby, it's true, but others just, they had a point. You know, they were discreet, wealthy people. They didn't like the fact that I'd be turning up for a site meeting surrounded by paparazzi. They, you know, and the paparazzi were very keen to find out what was going on with that kind of stuff. And so we were in this really weird position of me being really quite famous, but ridiculously poor, because there was no money coming in. Because obviously television doesn't pay any money at all. And so Jackie just said, well, let's talk to B&Q, let's talk to Graham and Brown, let's start building a product range. And that was 25 years ago. I mean, that was long before that sort of thing has been done. And actually, we're now celebrating, the Llewelyn-Bowen brand is officially 20 years old this year. And I'm very, very proud of, you know, the what we've done to the British home.
Well, and I'm glad...
Made them unsellable.
No, I don't think so. You just mentioned Blackpool, because did you choose the place for carers in Blackpool? Because you've got an affiliation to Blackpool. You're very involved with the
illuminations. No, they that was the production company. That was the BBC. And I think they liked the idea because, yes, I'm creative curator of the Blackpool Illuminations. I'm also now, believe it or not, chair of the Blackpool Museum Trust, which I think is highly amusing, bearing in mind the things I used to do to chairs. It's the revenge of the chair. And I'm very, very fond of Blackpool, incredibly fond with Blackpool. And people are always a bit astonished. But I feel very strongly that somewhere that Britain allows itself to architecturally take its bra off.
Yeah.
You know, everywhere else in the United Kingdom, it's all about the straightness, the rectitude of Georgian architecture or Victorian architecture or whatever. Actually, Blackpool's the only place where we built anything fun. And when you look hard, you see that there's a lot of quality there as well. And I kind of love the engagement there. It's a city that's entirely run by very bossy blonde women, which for me is heaven. I mean, that,
what are you saying?
Speaking, it's just anyone, a bossy blonde lady is just perfect. But no, it's funny because it's all about the sort of the personal engagement. It's people that have got a real passion for it. But it really suffers from kind of being dismissed. Although it's funny because certainly since the last 5 years, it's been taken much more seriously. You know, bodies like English Heritage are really looking at it. And I'm hoping that when we open the Blackpool Museum next year, which has the majority of the V&A archive and stuff like that, you know, it will put it into a much more historical context, into a much more cultural context. Actually, Blackpool used to be really quite swanky. You know, it's somewhere that you'd go to see Noel Coward or, you know, Sarah Bernhardt appeared there, disastrously, by all accounts. She was rubbish.
Well, it's always it's the kind of big milestone in the Strictly series, isn't it? Getting to the Blackpool.
Yeah, absolutely, and the Frank Matcham ballroom, and because it was after I left college, I got a job in the marketing department of a rubber company, and it always sounds so much more fun than it was, because it was rubber flooring and rubber crash doors, and I was dispatched on the train to go to Blackpool, which is somewhere I'd never been, on a very wet Thursday afternoon in November to talk to the guys at the Blackpool Winter Garden about a rubber floor, which is still there. And I can just remember getting off the train, I think this is 1985, and just thinking, this is the weirdest, strangest, but really quite loveliest place. And also the other thing, we used to do an enormous amount of changing rooms around Blackpool. Because people that live around Blackpool seem to, you know, they really do enjoy their interiors, you know, and they enjoy strong colours and bold patterns, you know. No, I never get any stick in Blackpool. You know, round here, everyone's going, oh, you painted anything purple yet? In Blackpool, it's all like, oh, I love your stuff. You know, flock it up, Laurence, you know.
Flock. So what is, talk to me about School of Flock. That's one of your
School of Flock,
projects.
Obviously, is... my way of keeping my celebrity wick dipped whilst we're all in lockdown. I really liked, it was my son-in-law Dan who came up with the idea, and I think it's a very good one. I've been quarantined with 2 graduates of the Met Film School and a lot of equipment, so they've been very keen to do something. And I wanted to do a weekly 15-minute ramble around the kind of the backstories of cultural interior design. I think everyone's got incredibly literate and very clever at working out what their style is, what their favourite colour is, but there's very little to put it into a kind of a context. So, you know, one of the early programmes was about, you know, the stories that come with colour, the backstories that come with colour. And that was really, really popular. People, I felt, you know, then suddenly understood that it wasn't just a question of saying, oh, I like green. actually they could go back through a whole series of historical or sociological stories, even scientific stories about the way that certain colours react. And so we've run right the way through the spectrum, really, including, I did a very widely watched programme on Aubrey Beardsley, because there was a big Aubrey Beardsley exhibition planned at the Tate at the moment, which of course hasn't gone ahead. Classicism, Gothicism, Art Deco, wallpaper. It's really just been an ability for me to kind of riff on what I keep up here. In my mind palace. And it's really funny working with my daughter, who is one of the scariest directors in the world. Absolutely takes no and I'll say something and she'll just look over the camera and say, really? Did that really happen? And so we have to stop and I have to Google it. Yes, look, it did really happen.
So, and you're filming all of this then during lockdown from home?
Yeah, we are. And it's now something that so many of the other, like the main broadcasters have got wind of, because we can send them at home, filmed content from at home, which actually looks quite classy. Instead of the stuff, the way that you can't turn on the television at the moment without looking up Stacey Dooley's nose, because she's forever got the computer down here, and it's just like that, And now over to Dooley Towers.
I must say, actually, I loved, you posted something on Instagram, I think it was this week, going around your beautiful garden. And the things that you've been doing. Yeah,
well, because we've been doing a series of films as well, which are a little bit more, generalised, a little bit more about what's going on, and it's been quite. They've been incredibly popular. I think. To begin with, we were a bit sort of concerned that if you were stuck in a flat somewhere with no outside space, seeing us rolling around our gracious Cotswold Manor House garden, ginned off our faces, might be a little bit off-putting. But it seems not. It seems people,
A bit of escapism.
I think people do. I think people look at what we're doing and thinking, yeah, well, thank goodness I don't have that garden then, if that's what happens.
Well, I think there was certainly mention in the film, the little clip that I saw of Jackie throwing tomatoes at people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. She's, she's now, how green-fingered she is, and she's now colonising most of the garden for vegetable production. I think she's slightly confusing lockdown with World War II. And we've now got to the stage where we will be totally and utterly self-sufficient in lettuce for the next 20 years, provided we can find a way of keeping lettuce for that long. Obviously, lettuce is not something that freezes well.
We'll pop round. Laurence, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really, really enjoyed chatting to you this afternoon, so thank you.
Not at all. When do we start? That was sort of quite a good warm-up.
We're going to the wine bar. So listen, thank you to Laurence, and thank you to all of you for watching. We'll be back next week with another guest, but until then, stay safe.